You have about 4 seconds before your mind starts negotiating. 1400 years ago, a monk named Benedict wrote a rule for exactly that moment. 14 centuries later, a researcher interviewed 100 of the most productive people alive and found they were, without knowing it, obeying the same rule. In the 6th century, Benedict of Nursia wrote a short set of instructions for how monks should live. It became the rule of Saint Benedict, and it quietly structured Western monastic life for the next 1400 years, longer than any government, any dynasty, any empire built in that same window of time. Chapter 22 covers exactly one moment, the moment of getting up. Benedict's instruction is almost comically direct. On rising, the monks are to encourage each other quietly and move at once because, in his own words, the sleepy like to make excuses. Read that twice. Not the lazy, not the undisciplined, the sleepy. Benedict is not describing a character flaw. He is describing a chemical state, the fog between the alarm and the first decision. And he is telling an entire community of men for 14 centuries that the fog is exactly when the excuses arrive, dressed as reasonable thoughts. 5 more minutes is not weakness. It is the sleepy mind doing precisely what Benedict predicted it would do. The monastic day did not begin with deliberation. It began with a bell, and the instruction was to move before the negotiation could finish. The psalms they read at that hour say the same thing from a different angle. My voice shalt thou hear in the morning. O Lord, in the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. The direction of that sentence matters. The prayer happens in the morning, not because mornings are convenient, but because the first attention of the day was considered too valuable to hand to anything else. O satisfy us early with thy mercy. Another line reads, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Early, not eventually. The Benedictine day was built entirely on the belief that whatever gets your first attention sets the terms for the rest. Now move forward roughly 1400 years to a writer named Tim Ferriss, who did something oddly similar with a very different toolkit. Instead of one rule handed down by one man, he interviewed something like 100 of the most productive, high-performing people he could find, athletes, founders, investors, artists, and asked all of them, separately, what their mornings actually looked like. He was not trying to invent a routine. He was trying to find the pattern hiding underneath 100 different routines. And the pattern he found was almost embarrassingly small. Silence in some form, meditation, quiet, no phone. A few minutes of real journaling. A small amount of physical movement, sometimes as little as 5 or 10 repetitions of something. And a deliberate, unhurried preparation of something to drink before the day started moving. For things, not 30. Here is what connects a 6th century monastery to 100 modern high performers who never spoke to each other. Neither Benedict nor Ferriss's subjects were relying on how they felt. Benedict did not ask the monks to feel ready before rising. He told them the sleepy mind would never volunteer readiness. So the community moved together, at once, regardless of the fog. The high performers Ferriss studied were not waiting for inspiration either. They had simply automated the first hour into a small, fixed sequence, so there was nothing left to negotiate with. Quiet. Move the body a little. Prepare something warm. Write something down. In that order, or close to it, before the day gets a vote. There's a phrase that gets repeated so often it has lost its edges. If you win the morning, you win the day. It gets attributed to whoever said it most recently, but the honest version is that nobody really owns it. It is one of those old, well-worn sayings that outlived every person who ever claimed it, the same way the rule of Saint Benedict outlived every empire that stood next to the monastery walls where it was read aloud. The saying survives because the mechanism underneath it is simply true. The first sequence of a day is rarely undone by anything that happens later in it. What both the monk and the researcher understood is that discipline in the morning is not really about willpower. It is about removing the moment where willpower would even be required. Benedict did not ask each monk to individually win an argument against his own fatigue every single dawn for the rest of his life. He built a structure so the argument never had to happen. Move at once. Encourage each other. The rule does the deciding, so the person does not have to. So ask yourself, honestly, what your first 4 seconds actually look like. Not your ideal morning, the real one. The one where the alarm goes off and something quiet in you starts building a case for 5 more minutes, or for the phone, or for staying exactly where you are. Benedict did not fight that voice with more willpower. He removed its opening. The high performers Ferriss studied did not outmotivate their own resistance every morning. They built a sequence so short and so fixed that resistance never got a foothold. Neither of them was relying on feeling ready. You do not need a new personality at 6 in the morning. You need a rule small enough to survive contact with a sleepy mind. So build the rule before the sleepy mind can build its excuse. I move at once, before the negotiation finishes. I do not wait to feel ready. I was never going to feel ready. I give the first minutes of the day silence, a little movement, and something worth writing down. I let a small, fixed sequence make the decision, so I do not have to make it fresh every morning. I direct my attention early, because early is when it is worth the most. A 6th century monk who never saw a clock and a modern writer who studied 100 high performers arrived at the same 4 seconds. Move before the mind finishes its excuse, and the rest of the day inherits that decision. If that gave you something to carry into this first hour, stay with this channel, where every morning starts before the world wakes up. And before you go, what is the one excuse your sleepy mind reaches for first every single morning? Write it below. I read each one. Begin disciplined. End reflective. Now rise.